Good evening. Oh, we are. Richard, you take your seat. Well, welcome everyone again, and particular a welcome to those who live outside of West Somerset. Welcome to West Somerset itself. And a special welcome to our Police and Crime Commissioner, Suman Stevens, to our Chief Constable, Nick Gargan, and our Chief Superintendent for Somerset, the current county plus North Somerset, which is Nikki Watson. So Nikki, welcome to you Sue, and welcome to you Nick. We're very pleased to see all three of you here and to see a large number of people coming to listen and then ask questions and make comments. So we are very pleased to see the high profile of our Police and Crime Commissioner, to listen to Nick Gargan, who we hear from time to time on BBC Somerset, and a particular welcome to Nikki Watson, who's more of our local person in Somerset. So we have got the top team here tonight and a chance to ask the questions and make comments. We know that we have special issues in West Somerset. We have the highest average age of any local authority in England, and that causes problems, as does our sparsity and large size and extreme rurality in parts of West Somerset, with 2/3 of the Exmoor National Park being in West Somerset and a large part of the Quantock Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. And of course we have the coast, and if we look at West Somerset, or most of it geographically, we have the two roads from Taunton, the A358, the A39 from Bridgewater to this part of West Somerset at any rate, and we know that there are problems in getting in and out of West Somerset, which does cause problems for businesses arriving and settling, staying, and also for house building. So we have special problems to do with rurality, distance, and to some extent some isolation from the west of Somerset. We're also the smallest district council in England by population. And two things before I hand over on this introduction. We are going through a partnership with our neighbours, Taunton Deane Borough Council, and that partnership is working extremely well at the moment. It's early days, but we're getting the top teams into place, and we will make savings, and we will have greater resilience and expertise for West Somerset from a larger management team. And the other challenge which faces us, if it comes off, is Hinkley Point, where we, as West Somerset Council, are the host district council and the planning authority, with a huge amount of responsibility for getting this project underway if the European Commission say okay, and if EDF then make the investment decision. That's big. It's important nationally, and of course for West Somerset communities it's very important both that we mitigate any negative impact, but also we take advantage of all the extra monies coming in, community benefit, and all the jobs and so on that may come into this area. So those are the two issues that face West Somerset, but I'm now going to hand you over to Suman Stevens for this evening.
Thank you very much. I don't think I need that, do I? Toby needs that.
Thank you.
Okay, so can everyone hear me? Yeah. Well, thank you, Tim, very much, and also thank you to the Town Council who've promoted this event. That's been really helpful. Can I first of all do the fire exits? I love doing this. It's a bit like being an air steward, isn't it? But no, there's one behind me, I'm told, the one by the door that we came in, and I think there's one, Becky, am I right, out there and to the right? Okay, but there isn't one that it won't be a practice if we get, if something goes off, and we will all leave extremely quickly, no doubt. But first of all, thank you all so much for coming. Great number of you here today, and that is a marvelous sight for our eyes, because it just shows you that there is a real interest in what is going on in the constabulary, what is going on as far as the PCC is concerned in West Somerset. I'm very pleased to be back in Minehead. I've spent an exciting day this afternoon out with Exmoor Search and Rescue. I've also been talking with various rangers from the National Park about wildlife crime. and rural crime. So I've had a real grounding in some of the issues that we may well talk about later on today. I'd also like to thank the Beach Hotel for hosting this evening's forum. For those of you who don't know, this hotel is currently undergoing extensive refurbishment. It's part of the wider YMCA vision to have the venue and restaurant run by young people, some of whom are here with us tonight. I think this is an amazing initiative to teaching young people new skills, and looking forward to coming back when it's complete, although can we make it sure it's a bit warmer next time? My main priority and why we're here this evening is to hear from you about the issues, however big or small, that affect you in the community. And the areas I plan to cover are about myself and my role as Police and Crime Commissioner, being your voice in policing, and how we can work together to make our communities safer. So, alongside with us, I have the Chief Constable, Nick Gargan, and Chief Superintendent, Nikki Watson. And between us, when we've all said a few words, then we will be opening to have any questions that you want to offer from the floor. First of all, let me just tell you a bit about myself. I was an independent candidate. I've never stood for anything before in my life. I was part of a bakery business for 25 years. I was a magistrate for 15 years on the youth, adult and family bench, and I was part of the monitoring board at Bristol Prison and on the police authority for the last 2 years before it was disbanded. So as you can see, I have a real interest in the criminal justice system, and it was very clear that when this job came up, and I felt that it was basically a very public job application that I did, was that policing is a tough enough role without having a party politician having oversight of it. And luckily 125,000 of you also agreed with that, and if any of those in the room did vote for me, thank you very much. But what the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner is not, I am not operational and I am not the Chief Constable. Pretty obviously, I don't look anything like Nick, but he has complete command and control over all his officers and his staff. But my responsibility is to appoint the Chief Constable and hold him to account, to set the police and crime plan based on local priorities, and to set the police part of the council tax precept. Now, I took the decision last month that I was going to raise the council tax precept by 1.99%. I've been out to consult with over 3,000 people over last summer, and it was very clear that over 75% said that they were prepared to pay a little more for their police because it's something that's obviously very important to them, and with the cutbacks that are coming out from central government, that we are going to be a smaller force, we are going to have less money. However, to go for more than a 2%, for those in the room that know about the referendum cap, is that anything over 2% would need a referendum, and I was not prepared to gamble £1 million of your money to find out whether or not everyone wanted to pay or not. That's not to say I'm ruling it out in the coming years. I'm not ruling it out because it depends on what happens over this coming year. But I felt that at 1.99% was as much as we could afford this time. I'm also responsible for commissioning community safety services, and so Safer Somerset will from April receive double the amount that they received last year, and that will be over £350,000, which will be given to community safety grants, which will be handled by the community safety partnerships in Somerset. I'm looking at this year's project bids, and there's some really exciting initiatives which, once we've gone through those, we'll explain a bit more. But tonight I just would like to highlight two areas about my role which I think are important. One, I'm very much your voice. I am the public voice, and I'm here to connect your views with the police and the wider partners, acting very much as a bridge between what the public want to have as direct say into policing. And one of the reasons I think police and crime commissioners are working, and I would say this, wouldn't I, being one, is that I replaced the police authority. In the last year, the police authority had just over 250 people who contacted them. I've already had over 5,000 people. And the cynics amongst you may say, I bet they're all complaints. No, they're not. But there is a real interest from people, and I think that the number of you that are here today actually reflect that, actually that want to give feedback into the police service, because how can we, so that we can improve the police service. That's what we are trying to do. And I think having so many people who are taking the time to email, to write, to phone, and to attend public forums such as this, I believe that there is a real need to listen very carefully to local people. And I'm also very keen on making sure that I listen to local people that aren't used to shouting. What I call the quiet voices, to people who don't know how to lobby people like me. So not necessarily all the big organisations, but the smaller organisations, to people who don't maybe not even come to meetings like this. So I spend one day a week out listening to those, meeting those in the community. So I was at Willerton last week with some of the members of the Somerset Badger Group to discuss their concerns on wildlife crime. I then did a community drop-in session in Priors Wood in Taunton. I visited a housing association to listen about how they're tackling some of the issues. I visited a women's refuge and spoke to some of those where victims of domestic abuse have been forced out of their home to feel safe, especially with their children. And in the evening, I attended a parish council meeting in Street, where I listened again to what local people want in their local areas. It's very important to me that local people have the chance, and to make sure that the issues that they want to raise, that we take on board. And by working together, as Tim said earlier, it's only by working together with the police, with the councils, with other statutory organisations, voluntary organisations, charities, local groups, can we make sure that your concern is something that we take on board. The Police and Crime Plan was published last year together with 6 local plans. And this year we're going further and offering 9 local plans. So for all the local authority areas which reflect the partnership working that we think is so important for the police and local authorities, that we will be doing a West Somerset Police and Crime Plan, which is just going through its final drafts at the moment. The priorities in the plan remain unchanged and will continue to focus on the things that matter most to you. You tell me that reducing the impact of antisocial behaviour is absolutely key. You tell me that tackling domestic and sexual violence, particularly violence towards women and children, are important. Preventing and reducing burglary and the fear of burglary in your area, and putting victims at the heart of the community, at the criminal justice system. I've also launched an action fund where I put 200,000 into, where local organisation and charities and smaller groups can actually apply for a small grant up to £5,000, where you tell me that there are some very creative and innovative ideas, and all for a want of small amount of money, that you can get up and running. And we now have that. We now have that action fund, and local groups in Somerset have benefited from over £21,000, and the money has gone to projects raising awareness of doorstep burglaries amongst older people and working with young people. And in fact, in Minehead, we gave a grant of £4,000 to work with, to help an organisation work with drug addiction and young people. So you can see, I really want to get the money going down to as local an area as possible. Another focus for me is championing the voice of victims, and this will be particularly important over this next year, because I will be responsible for commissioning local victim support. I'm very clear that victim satisfaction and looking after victims is absolutely key. We can do better. We either over-contact victims or we don't contact them at all. We have to be far more consistent on working with victims and making sure that we look after them from the time that they report a crime until the time that they either go through the criminal justice system, but of course some may not go through that, and giving them that support as well. One of the issues that we may well talk about is road safety. This has been particularly, I've had many contacts from West Somerset residents about how we can work together with road safety. I'm very keen on promoting Community Speed Watch and all the other watches that there are in the area, so Neighbourhood Watch and the pact groups. I know in Minehead we've got an active pub watch and shop watch, and how we can work together. Because working with the local authority, and working with organisations such as the independent advisory groups. I know we've got some of those people here today, and street pastors and any other group. We can't do it by ourselves. It's only by working together can we actually tackle this. So empowering groups, empowering in whichever way you think in your communities work, I'm very committed to working alongside with you. We've also set up an independent residents panel where volunteers in the community can actually look at police complaints. Some of you will know that from the national papers that integrity is a real issue, particularly in certain areas in the country. And I believe that letting people in and seeing how the police deal with complaints just shows that we're not hiding behind closed doors, that we are opening the doors to local people to come and see what the constabulary are doing. And I think that in a very short space of time, they've already made a difference looking at the language and tone of how we respond. I've also set up a rural crime forum to reduce the impact of crime on our local businesses. And again, if you want to know more, please visit the website. And along with 19 other PCCs across England and Wales, we're now part of a national rural crime forum in make sure that we look at ways that we can improve rural crime, the ways of tackling it, because we've got to learn from other best practices around the country. So that's a quick gallop through what I have done and what I am trying to do. It's only by speaking and listening to you can I be truly representative to be your PCC. As I say, I'm only as good as PCC as the information you give me. All right, so please feel free to access me in any way you like through websites, through email and everything else. And please give me information. If you don't tell me stuff, there really is nothing I can do. Okay, so please be, I'm sure I don't need to ask you to be open and honest, because we do need to work together. So if you have been, thank you for listening. Nick, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Nick Gargan, Chief Constable. I'm used to doing this standing up, actually. I'm itching to stand up. Oh, go on, I'll stand up. I need to hold this, though. Can you hear me at the back? Okay, jolly good. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't come naturally to me to sit down. Do we need to shift the angle? Okay, sorry. It's a very emotional evening for me, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to tell you. I am a season ticket holder at Leicester City Football Club. They're at home tonight against Yeovil. Whoever put this in the diary, I can't believe it. The car got to the junction at Gordano and the steering wheel was tugging to the left. But the magnetic pull of your interest in policing was all that it took to drag me this way, and I'm delighted to be here. But if I appear distracted, I do have a score update service primed. Thank goodness for the Beach Hotel Wi-Fi. It's been a great season to be a Leicester City supporter. Not such a good season to be a Yeovil supporter, I must say. But that aside, I genuinely do appreciate your interest. I remember in the days of police authorities turning up to, what were they called, Section 104 committee meetings when I was as Chief Superintendent in Leicester. And I'd sit down there and think, oh, well, at least 3 people had turned up. Unfortunately, one of them was the caretaker for the hall we were in, and the other 2 were the chair and vice chair of the police authority. It's great to have this conversation and to have an interaction with you. I thought I'd just briefly talk you through the 4 things that pop into my head when I wake up in the middle of the night, or at least the 4 things that have any relevance to you, that pop into our head in the middle of the night.
I'd stop there. You're digging a hole here.
I'll spare you the others. The first of them is money, and Sue's mentioned the financial situation in which the constabulary and the police service generally finds itself. I happen to have the national responsibility for finance and resources. Individual chiefs, many of us take on an additional national role over and above our local role as chief. The guy in Merseyside, he was at the front of the queue when they dished out the sexy jobs. He got crime business area. The woman who runs Surrey Police, she got uniform operations business area. sadly, I was in the car parks talking to a mate at the time, and by the time I come back in, all there was left was finance and resources. But it does give me an insight into the way the service is being treated financially and the challenges that we face. And just a couple of observations on that. Number one, this constabulary, by the end of the 17-18 financial year, will have had a real terms 27% reduction in its resourcing compared to the position at the end of the 10-11 financial year. And I suspect one of the things that may happen this evening is you may ask a few questions about relative policing priorities and why we aren't doing more of some things. It could be that you won't, but I suspect you may. And I just ask you if we can frame the conversation in the context of that fairly sobering statistic, 27%. And actually, you know, we've not even got it worst. I was talking to a chief constable of a much larger force the other day. He's done some analysis and he thinks the figure for him is 40%. And so, you know, these are very, very sobering figures. And I like the words of Professor Ian Kennedy, who was in health regulation, who said, this conversation shouldn't be about cuts. This conversation should be about the service we can provide to patients, in his case, victims in ours, the service we can provide to patients for different sums of money. And as Chief Constable, I will do my best with the cash I'm given, but if 27% is coming out in real terms in the resourcing, that just sets a framework. And, you know, I'm very proud to lead this constabulary. It's full of outstanding men and women. Confidence and satisfaction in it is higher than in other police forces, and it performs very well. But, you know, miracle workers, we are not. And we do our best and we need to be determined to improve, but that's the context. Number one, finance. Number two is performance. You know, we've been an improving police force. My predecessor, Colin Ports, came here at a time when if somebody had come to me, I was a chief superintendent in Leicester at the time, if somebody had come to me in 2005 and said, name the 5 police forces in the country that are struggling the most, I could guarantee you that Avon and Somerset would have been on my list and virtually everybody else's. As it happens, alongside Nottinghamshire, Humberside, Cambridgeshire, and the jury would be out on who the other one was. There are a few contenders. But Avon and Somerset would without doubt have been on that list. By the time he left last year, it would have been on nobody's list. He arrived at a time when the constabulary was recording 175,000 offences each year and was detecting about 1/6 of them. He left at a time when we were recording fewer than 100,000 offences each year and detecting 1/3 of them. So the progress had been immense. But nevertheless, you know, that's not an excuse to say, and things can't continue. You know, we will do our best to continue to improve that performance, and Nikki will talk you through a local picture of how we're doing in Somerset. I won't steal her thunder. But we also need to respond to new emergent forms of crime, because actually, you know, some crime has clearly shifted. Your car's less likely to be broken into, your house is less likely to be broken into, you are less likely to be robbed in the street, and your car's less likely to be stolen. But you're much more likely to become a victim of somebody attacking you and your finances through your computer, stealing your identity, and there are other forms of traditionally hidden criminality that we're getting better at dealing with and we're working harder to uncover, whether that's child sexual exploitation, modern slavery, female genital mutilation, serious sexual assaults, or indeed domestic abuse, which is present in our community to a worrying degree. So we're sort of trading off the old police performance against a new way of thinking about police performance. And then the other thing that we're working hard to do is to maintain the confidence of our communities. I say it's traditionally high, but we want to get it higher. And of course, we're not helped every time you have an incident coming out invariably from somewhere else, but not exclusively from somewhere else. You know, one bad incident gives you a big knock, and then, you know, hundreds of men and women each have to incrementally creep back up to restore the confidence in the constabulary that we lose in some of these national cause célèbres that we have been hearing about, frankly, too often recently. And then the final thing about organisational performance is, of course, just events. You know, things happen, murders happen, areas flood, badger calls are imposed upon us, people decide we're going to open big nuclear power stations, and there are policing implications for all of these things. They're just events, and there's no point us bleating about it. We've just got to get on with doing our job and doing it as well as we can. And it's just maintaining the kind of battle rhythm of a police force and dealing with all of those things is the second thing that pops into my head when I wake up in the middle of the night. The third thing is developing the organisation. Now, part of that's about a new technology strategy. You know, how do we keep up with fantastic advances in technology that can really revolutionise the way that we do our job, and yet in the context of a police service that is really quite a bad customer, where fragmented customers, individual chief constables forget that actually in the greater scheme of things we're pretty small beer, and think, you know, we tend to think we're more important than we are. If you look at that, there's The Guardian each year do a beautiful big bubble chart of where public expenditure is going, £691 billion of public spending, where this tiny dot halfway down on the right, we represent the police service in total, 0.81% of public spending. And yet you see, you know, chiefs, they do think, some of them, not me of course, but some of them do think they are the big I am. And we need to remember we're small customers, and we need to club together and use technology intelligently. Estate strategy. We may even talk about buildings this evening. That wouldn't surprise me either. I've got a lot of big buildings that are far, far bigger than we need, and they really are terribly expensive to own. Minehead Police Station, 1,154 square metres of floor space, and the people in there just rattle around in it. You know, and that's an expense. And so the organisation development needs to take into account the balance between, on the one hand, paying for people, and on the other hand, paying for buildings to put them in and cars for them to drive round. And we need to get that balance right. I favour having more people and smaller, more modern, more efficient buildings. You may have a view, we can discuss that. I'll be very keen to hear. And then the final thing about organisational development is some work about the operating model, as we call it. How do we deliver our services? And in May last year, we sat down as a chief officer team and decided that it was time to take a fresh look at the way we delivered services, because some of them hadn't been looked at for quite some time. And so we found the best person we could find, one of our most able senior chief superintendents, Sarah Crew, and we said to Sarah, go and find yourself a team of the best people you can find and look at the way you deliver our services, and then come back and make some proposals about how we might do it. I put two conditions on that. The first was, Sarah, you really must make sure that you take the organisation with you, that you listen to people and that you let them know what's going on, and you ask for their views and you get their diagnosis of the problems we're trying to solve. And the second thing is, don't come back with opinion that isn't backed up by evidence. Please come back and tell us, this is what we're going to change and this is why, and this is where it's been shown to work. Or if it hasn't been shown to work, you know, let's test it and test that it works. So that there's an evidence base for change rather than just some strong opinion. And I think what she's come back with is very impressive. It seems to have a lot of support within the organisation. The changes will be taking effect over the next few months. In part, we are driven by the fact that, you know, I've inherited, for example, 3 very big new PFI custody sites. We'll be opening 36 cells at Bridgewater in not many weeks' time, 48 cells at Keynsham, 48 cells at Patchway. We've got to close a few cells down to make ourselves something other than a sort of candidate to be a prison business, and we're going to be doing that too. And I think that the work that Sarah Crew and her team has done is fantastic. The biggest single change we'll see is that there's about 1,000 people in this constabulary who have been lulled into the false sense that they are somehow immune from direct contact with the public they serve. They tend to work in little squads, and far too many of them go home at about 4 o'clock, which is good for the viewing figures of Countdown, bad for you. And what we're saying to some of those people is that, you know, we need to just change the way we operate. There'll be more late shifts. There'll be more people who will feel part of the front line, and will be there to be called on. So instead of having a beleaguered response function, a very thin blue line that turns up to incident after incident on a rather grey and drizzly evening like this, simply to gather some details and pass the information into the system so that 2 or 3 days later somebody from a squad can go along and see the victim or the person who contacted us. You'll see the person you need to see on the day that you ring in, and as often as not we'll be able to deal with incidents in their entirety on that day, because the expertise is there, rather than having a sort of bureaucratic system that's pushing incidents around the inside of the police service. And we're confident that that will make a difference. As I said, we're only doing things that are either evidence-based or trialled, and this is being trialled in South Gloucestershire as I speak. And what we're finding there, Inspector Andy Workman is about to retire, but he's still Inspector in South Gloucestershire. He describes turning up to work late on a late shift one Wednesday, where he's used to briefing 12 officers when he goes to a late shift. Suddenly all these people who are now at his disposal, the neighbourhood people, others from the intelligence function, etc., suddenly he's got 43 people available to him rather than 12. That's precisely what I want to see. And so that organisational development will continue. The savings plan from my perspective is that we'll do this modernisation first, then the next couple of years we'll go into an area, a time when we focus very much on collaboration, either with other police forces or with local authorities. And Tim and I were just talking about the potential for doing that down here in the way that we're already working with Mendip, North Somerset and others. And then the third phase will be looking at the developments as we reach the end of our relationship with South West 1 and the collaboration with Taunton Deane, Somerset County Council and IBM, which I should say has its critics, but as a relative and an entirely independent person, I think there's a lot more good about that than bad, actually, and it's delivered against a lot of its targets. And indeed, the procurement side of South West 1, just as an example, passed its savings target recently. 2/3 of the way through the contract, it had already exceeded its entire savings target. The final area for me, the final area of 4, behind money, performance and organisational development, is about the culture of the organisation. And people have been talking about police culture. In fact, I studied it at university in the 1980s. And of course, giant strides have been made in police culture since that time, but still there's more to do. I am forever, if Sue had £1 for every time she's heard me talk about Sir Ronnie Flanagan, she wouldn't be here, I'm sure. But Sir Ronnie Flanagan, you may remember him. He was the boss of the Royal Ulster Constabulary and then went off to be Chief Inspector of Constabulary for Tony Blair. And he was asked to do a report by the then Home Secretary, I think it was Jackie Smith, and he published his report in 2008, and it was all about what needs to change in policing. And he took us through technology, and he talked about the workforce, and he talked about collaboration, and he talked about all manner of other things. And then he got to the very end of his report, paragraph 7.69 in case you're interested, and he said, he talked a little bit about police authorities, but he said basically the one thing that we could do that would improve policing and confidence in policing is to drive up the quality of individual interactions between individual members of a police service, be they officers, PCSOs or anyone else, and individual members of the communities they serve. And that for me, that struck a chord with me in 2008 and has never left me. Driving up the individual interactions between the police and the public. And I think we do that by the messages we give to officers. We do that by our openness as an organisation. We do that by people in leadership positions in policing being open to criticism. And if people criticise us, our opening position needs to be, maybe this person's got a point, rather than how do we prove them wrong. And just being transparent, you know, whatever, I was persuaded against my better judgment 2 years ago to start using Twitter because people said, well, actually that might be, and I say there may be people in the room who don't use it. I recommend it. It's got a lot to commend it, but through the internet, through a better website, we've just opened up a new website for the force. It's much better than its predecessor. Through public engagement and events like this, whatever it is, you know, just through talking to the press more openly. You know, an open police force is a good police force. And I shall finish just by saying what I say to officers. And you know, there's officers in the room. I'm saying it to them now. There are 3 things that matter to me from our staff. And the first of them is that they behave with integrity. You have to act with integrity. Without integrity, a police service is nothing. And I remember Sir David O'Dowd, another Chief Inspector of Constabulary, wrote this big report on integrity in 1999, and he began with the phrase, "There can be no more basic requirement of a member of a police service than that they are honest and act with integrity." And that's the first thing I say to people. The second is, you've just got to work hard. You know, sometimes it's boring and sometimes it's unpleasant, and actually there will be people starting late shifts in this force this evening who'll be feeling a little bit grumpy about it, and they'll look at the queue of incidents they're about to go to, and they'll know that actually of all the addresses they're going to, they've probably been to every one before, and they'll be seeing people, some of whom are really quite difficult to help, and not all of whom are guaranteed to be either polite or grateful. This is difficult. But you know, the people who join this job, they do it. You know, we recruited back in May, and we had 4,000 applicants for about 150 vacancies. So 96% of people were not accepted. Those who are accepted, you know, it is a privilege to do this job, and if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Pack up, go and do something else. But it's a privilege to do it, but we should do it to the very highest standard. The organisation's values talk about doing today's work today, and that's what I ask people to do. Work hard, stick in, and do your best. And then the third thing, and I'm going to stop after this, that I say to people is, you know, we've got to treat people fairly and with respect. And that means talking to members of the public in straightforward English that they're going to understand, not using any of this jargon nonsense about a male person in the premise and all that motor vehicle baloney public house crap that the police have been talking for years. Just talking to people in straightforward English and treating them fairly and with respect, and treating victims and anybody, even the ungrateful people, as you would want your own family to be treated. And my message to our operational staff is, if you act with integrity, work hard, treat people fairly and with respect, you won't go far wrong with me. I've overrun a little bit, but I've been enjoying myself. Sorry, I'm going to pass over to Nikki Watson, who is the local commander.
Leicester's disqualified.
They kick off in 2 minutes.
Disqualified.
Nikki. Okay, good evening everybody. I'm, as everybody has said, Nikki Watson. I'm the local commander for Somerset. I'm going to give you a bit of a flavour about the work that's going on locally and some of our achievements and what we've been doing to make the area a safer area. So if we have the first slide, fantastic. Right, so the Somerset area is divided into 3 local policing areas, and this area is what we call Somerset West, local policing area, but encompasses the local authorities of Sedgemoor, Taunton Deane and West Somerset. The local policing commander, I believe, is at the back of the room, Paul Mogg. Do you want to stand up? Paul joined us in January, so you may not all know him, but he covers this area and works in this area every day. Okay, so we benefit from living in a very safe area here. Even compared to other very similar rural areas around the country, we are much safer. And that is because the local police officers, the community support officers, work really closely with residents, business owners, members of the community to achieve some really impressive results in not only reducing crime, but also bringing those who commit crime to justice. So in the last 5 years, we've reduced crime so much so that there are 3,000 fewer victims in the Somerset West area. Bringing offenders to justice, putting them in front of the courts, giving them tickets or giving them cautions. We're achieving at the moment a 40% detection rate compared to what was 30% 5 years ago. And the hard figures are important, but actually much, much more nowadays, and what's really important to me is that we are delivering a good service. We are meeting the expectations of the people that demand the service from us. And so we measure how satisfied our customers and our victims are. So as you can see from the slide, the victim satisfaction for people that have experienced crime is at over 90% for this area, and for antisocial behaviour, 83%. But we can do better, and we're striving to continually improve the whole time. And Sue has set us the target to get our satisfaction for antisocial behaviour victims similar and on a par to those of crime victims. So there's lots of work that we still are working towards. Nick has mentioned some of our buildings. The picture on the slide is a picture of Express Park at Bridgewater, which is one of our new PFI buildings which will have a large custody. This building at Express Park will support the local policing that takes place in Minehead and surrounding area, and it will complement what we have in Minehead. So we will still have response officers, patrol officers and neighbourhood beat managers, PCSOs working in Minehead and the surrounding areas. But can you just go to the next slide? Okay, right, sorry. Your slides are slightly different to mine. That's okay. So what will be at Express Park will be some of our specialist resources, our custody, as I said, and the neighbourhood and patrol resources that cover the Bridgewater area and the Burnham area. And we hope that we'll be opening it. Certainly the custody should start there from the summertime. So it's not that many more months and it will be open. Okay. Right, so Sue talked to you about the priorities that she has set us, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of information around some of those priorities as to what is going on locally. So if we look at domestic violence, if you read lots of reports, we are told that, and I believe that domestic violence and sexual assaults are underreported. People don't have the confidence to come forward and tell people what they've experienced and what they've been through. So Sue has set us the target, the ambition to increase the number of reports from domestic abuse victims and from sexual offence victims. And over the last 4 years in this area, we've increased the reporting for domestic abuse by 20% and for sexual offences by 40%. So we, by working with local people, with communities, and giving training to our officers, we're able to give those victims the confidence to be able to come forward, tell us what's happened so that we can investigate. We also do a lot of work in respect of trying to prevent and reduce those sort of crimes from actually happening. So we're doing work in schools and academies, certainly to improve and support children affected, but also making people aware of their responsibilities, what's right and wrong, and the way that they should behave. Okay. Antisocial behaviour, that's another area that's a priority that communities have told Sue is important. So for this area, we've reduced the reports of antisocial behaviour by 15% in the last 3 years. 15%, what does that mean? It's actually 76 fewer victims per month in the west of Somerset compared to 3 years ago. And the way that we've done that, we can't do it alone, but we've worked with local communities, with partner agencies, really important partners when we come to antisocial behaviour, people like the social landlords, housing authorities, local authorities, trading standards, licensing authorities. We've had several sort of what we would call crack house closures. Sounds very grand. It's premises where there's lots of drug dealing going on. We've closed them down, certainly in Bridgewater and the Taunton areas. We've been effective in the use of antisocial behaviour orders and contracts, and the government is bringing out a new suite of sort of measures and controls that we can use for antisocial behaviour that we should get later this year, and we will certainly explore the use of those. And certainly very locally, Charlie Fitzpatrick, who's one of the local officers in this area, arranged the funding and arranged for a theatre company to come down to the local college and give input to 450 students around the safe use of alcohol and antisocial behaviour. I know that went down extremely well. So we're really working hard to reduce the impact of the most persistent and the nuisance offenders in the communities, but we certainly rely on people telling us what's happened so that we can work with them to tackle it. The next area I was going to talk about was burglary. Over the last 5 years, in this area of Somerset, we've got 1,000 fewer victims of burglary. That's domestic burglary and commercial burglary into businesses, shops. So that's a significant reduction. And even since the start of the year, 200 less victims in this area of Somerset. So to give you a bit more specific, there was a series of burglaries in the Wellington area where we arrested the suspect, and the way that we did that was we had an electronic device, a phone or an iPad, that type of thing, stolen, and you can turn on the tracker and find out where those devices are. So we're using the modern technology to help us in our fight against crime and finding the people that are committing the crime. The satisfaction rate for victims of domestic burglary currently standing at 93% this year, but we want to get to that 100% satisfaction. So we're still working really hard, and the surveys that we get back from our victims, we look at the verbatim comments and we feed them back to the officers that have attended, and we use that to improve our service and train and develop our officers. There's lots of specific plans in respect of burglary, and particularly we target the hotspots. So we monitor where and analyse where the burglaries are happening, and we target operations into those areas. Okay, so as I've already mentioned, we police by consent, but we certainly do not police alone. We are absolutely 100% reliant on communities and partners working with us so that we can achieve the results that we all want to make our areas safer. So giving you a few examples of some of the partnership working that's going on locally, the Rural Crime Initiative, I know Sue mentioned that, looking at isolated rural communities and businesses and reducing the crime that they may be subjected to. Family focused projects, those are projects where we give intensive support with partners and other organisations to families where members may be involved in crime or antisocial behaviour. The Somerset and Avon Rape and Sexual Support Service was launched in Taunton recently, and there's a really vibrant domestic abuse forum in the Taunton area, but it covers the wider West Somerset area, and that's been recognised as best practice, and the rest of the force are modelling their support on that particular initiative. And of course, the huge numbers of volunteers that help us and work with us. We've got all sorts of watch programmes, the CCTV monitoring operation, of which Minehead is award-winning. I think some of them may be here tonight. Cadet programme, victim advocacy, speed watch schemes. Volunteers absolutely support my officers day in, day out, and the PCSOs, and do a really fantastic job. We have got a sort of renowned project that's going on in the west of Somerset. We call it the Holcombe One team. It's a partnership project where my staff work with the local council, the county councils, social workers, certainly social landlords, the college, all sorts of people to come together and work in a specific geography where there are problems, certainly with perhaps drug and alcohol abuse, crime, unemployment, all sorts of issues where the families need support. They are families that may be being worked with all those different agencies, and actually they could have visits from several of those agencies in the past, all on one day, none of it coordinated or linked. It can be quite confusing for the family, and actually the support wasn't as effective as it could be because it wasn't joined up. So we're working with the other agencies to give joined up mentoring, coaching and support to those families to improve the outcomes of the adults, but really importantly the children in those families. We've already heard about the Hinkley Point nuclear build, really significant infrastructure project. Will be the largest building site in Europe, I think, when it actually is in full swing. We'll bring in a significant number of workers, 25,000 over the sort of 10-year period of the build, but at any one time could be up to 10,000 workers. Lots of HGV, sorry, that's lorry movements, and of course that will create congestion potentially. It would potentially lots of other issues. It's good for the area, and what we're doing is working with partners and communities to reduce any negative impacts that it might have, so that we can make the most of the benefits. Okay, I think that's it, and I know that we're going to invite some questions soon.
Thank you very much, and thank you for listening to us. I think it's now very much now for you to ask us questions about anything that you like, any burning issues, and we have Toby, who's standing in the middle, who has a mic with him, and if you could wait for the mic to come so that everyone can hear the question. So anyone that wants to ask the first question?
There's always got to be a first.
There's always, if you just wait, thank you. Oh, thank you.
I live in Trinity Way there, right? If you was in the pictures, I'd look on the other side of you. I live in Trinity Way, and I'm concerned about the amount of traffic that goes into Butlins. Now, the gateway for Butlins is far too close to the roundabout. I can't turn left when I come out of Trinity Way, and I can't turn right. This is Friday night. Now, it's only one day a week you have this kind of congestion. So when we had the caravan up here at one time, I went around and I suggested that they use the road down to the golf course to stop and come back up the roundabout, and in that way, because the gateway in the Butlins is too close. The roundabout is congested if you want to come in from this way, so I really would like to see that altered. Equally, I would like to see a yellow box put at the bottom of Trinity Way. But we won't get that done because it costs a lot of money to put the paint down, because I've made inquiries about that. But we could have a couple of white lines, because people will come over. I'm surprised at this stage that nobody's been trapped on the railway line, to be honest with you. And on top of that, the council, they put up the big sign about the roundabout, and I get people outside of my house, coaches. I've had an 8-wheeler, that's an HGV by the way, I haven't been a lorry driver, just a joke, go out and help them turn around, because it should be the other side.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Nikki, do you want to answer?
Am I going too fast? Sorry.
No,
I'm trying to hurry in case I don't want to take the floor.
No, I'm understanding your question and your issue, and certainly we do work really, really closely with the management of Butlins, and Butlins don't want to be a burden to the local community. They want us to live peacefully together and for things to work. So I don't know the exact answer, but there's some of the local officers are here tonight, so they've also heard your concerns. So we will work with the local authority, the highways and Butlins to try and get the best result that may ease that traffic congestion at that particular time of the week. So I can't give you an exact answer of what we will or won't do tonight, but we'll certainly look into that.
Well, it's only like one day a week.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's always easy to criticise. It's not always easy to come up with the answers. I've experienced that in my previous work. But,
Well, you've made us a couple of suggestions, so we'll have a look at that.
Okay,
well,
Nick,
yeah, I'd
if
like
you'd
to
like
see
to...
that done. And because some of these coaches, and I've had 2 are continental. So with that sign, should definitely be the other side.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just make an observation. There are a few colleagues in the room, some of them in uniform, some incognito. If a question gets asked that you think you've got the answer to, what you say, actually we tried that 2 years ago and this worked or didn't work, then by all means stick your hand up and speak up, because certainly Nikki and I will be stretched to the limit of our memory of detail of the organisation on some of the questions that were likely to be asked. So if colleagues have got an answer, let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Thank you. You mentioned the new building at Bridgewater, and I believe there might be a suggestion of a centralised custody block there with the possibility of Minehead cells closing. Now, they tried this, I remember from bitter experience, in West Midlands, where they built a centralised custody block at Walsall and closed the cells at Willenhall. Now, there's only about 4 miles in between the two, but in between is also junction 10 of the M6, which means that the travelling distance is roughly the same as it is from here to Taunton. It meant then that detections dropped, crime rate went up, vandalism went up, and eventually, because there were no policemen on the street, they were all travelling backwards and forwards, everyone started to notice. 12 months later, it all changed and it went back. What will be your reaction if the same thing happens again, if crime rates go up, if detections go down and vandalism goes up because of the closure, possible closure at Minehead?
I think that, as I indicated when I was making my opening remarks, we're going to have more cells per officer than any police force in the world that I can see. So it would be sensible to start shutting a few down. At Minehead, I looked at the figures for the last couple of years, and last year it was just under one custody record opened per day. This year it's been a shade over, but actually that doesn't justify the cost of the space. So I think what we need to do is think about how we mitigate the risks that you've just summarised, I think very accurately. But what's changed between now and what was probably happening in the West Mids, and I remember a bit about the West Mids because I used to be a regular visitor to Rose Road custody at Harborne. What's different now is the rate at which money's going out of policing. So actually it's not a choice of whether officers are here dealing with somebody they've arrested or away at Bridgewater getting detained people booked in. It's actually a question of whether we've got that officer or not. That's the dilemma that I face. What we have done to build into our plan for these new custody centres, and again, I inherited. I think it's a reasonably good idea, but it's not an idea I'll take any credit for. Having these big consolidated custody centres, we've also built into the plan actually extra transportation that comes out to pick up the people that have been arrested at peak times and take them back to the custody office. So actually, for arresting officers, in many cases, it'll be less of a time off the streets than there is now, and certainly at peak times, and we'll be able to anticipate when those peak times are. And of course, we know it's seasonal here. We know it's times of the day and day of the week. We know that that there are particular moments around events in relation to Butlins that we can prepare for. We can have that custody transportation here ready to deal at a time of peak demand. But let's not be fooled into thinking that Minehead Custody Office is a thriving hub of detained people. I went in there the other day. I don't mean to be dismissive of it. This isn't the measure of success in Minehead isn't going to be how many people we get locked up in policing terms. That's just it's not about that here. When you go in the custody office, there's copies of Hillwalker magazines and things in there for arrested people to look at. It's not like a busy central Bristol nick, and we shouldn't pretend it is. But we should be absolutely conscious. Our officers here are good officers and they do nick people, and we need to make sure that when they're arresting people, those people can be dealt with efficiently. It's my belief that having a empty custody office here that's costing us a bomb isn't the best way of doing that.
I think we also need to be very clear is that because of the savings that we have got to find and the fact that we are going to centralise custody, we cannot afford to keep very large buildings. It is far more important to have officers on the street and then rather than large buildings. But that's not to say that we're going to be reducing our police presence. And in the same way, as I said at the very beginning, that the Chief Constable and I want to be open and transparent. So we're sharing our thoughts. We believe that Minehead police station is too big, so we will be looking at other properties. And as some of you will know, is that there is very early talks about working together with fire and ambulance and having a site together on that. That has to make sense. I'm sure none of you would keep a very large building that's not going to be used, that could save money, that we could put that money into officers. And the same way as we would have an inquiry office, which could be far more central, right on the high street. We have to go to where people are, okay? And it is incumbent on us as a business to make sure that we're using your money. It's taxpayers' money, and taxpayers do not want a half-empty building. You want to have You tell me constantly you want more police visibility, and that's what I'm going to be working towards. Thank you.
No, I don't need to.
Okay. Toby in the front here.
Helen, we are a very rural community here, in most part. And if you look at the cuts that you're going to have to make, or the changes you're going to have to make to policing, how will it impact on the rural community, bearing in mind that if you should need a response time from Taunton or Bridgewater, you're looking in excess of half an hour to get an officer across. Now, there are often occasions, as you know, for what I do as a volunteer, that you do experience lags in time. Are the cuts going to impact on the response time that we have in West Somerset?
In the end, there's the kind of basic fact I started, didn't I, with 27% real reduction over an 8-year period, and that's taken us from having nearly 3,400 police officers to having fewer than 2,800 police officers. So the starting point is we're going to have to work a bit harder. We're going to have to be a bit canny, and we're going to have to think our way around that. And so the starting point is things will get worse unless we are clever. And with the sort of things we're trying to do to be clever, I described some of them. It's about moving people out of offices to the front line, making people available for response. A conversation, Nikki and I were in a meeting about this operating model yesterday morning, and we were talking about the changes that can be made by making officers deploy singly rather than in pairs. And a decision was made, actually, we'll take more from Bristol because they're less effective at working singly. Actually, Somerset's become very effective at working singly, and it's the norm to see officers patrolling and driving around on their own. And so we'll insulate Somerset from that cut because we think we can make more efficiencies and better working elsewhere. Our job is to apply common sense to strike a balance between the needs of more urban communities, the needs of more rural communities, understanding the implications of sparsity and remoteness, whilst also understanding that there are certain areas where people are absolutely rushed off their feet and are running from job to job to job, which is typically not the experience of patrolling officers here, and that's the balance that we aim to strike. And obviously one of the reasons that we survey people for their satisfaction and confidence, etc., is so that we can find the feedback to know those areas where we're getting that more right than others. And it's also the value of events like this, and it's why our volunteers actually just from a day-to-day basis telling us what's working and what's not. So there's no science to this. The competing demands are many. We're doing our best. We need to hear where we're getting it right. But fundamentally, 27% reductions in resourcing means that, whilst we'll try our very best to carry that off with the minimum impact, you can't say there'll be no impact.
I'll just quickly add to that. With the advances of technology and computers, which generally help to be a good thing, if I go back not that many years, everything we do is computerized now. And I used to go into the report writing rooms in the police station, and there would be banks of police officers at computers, not out on the street, because we asked them to put everything on the computer. Well, I'm delighted that in the last couple of months, we've just rolled out proper mobile data terminals that officers take out with them on patrol now. So even if they've got to do some paperwork, they can do it either in a victim's house, or they can do it sat up at a strategic roundabout, which is a hotspot area. So they are out and about in the community. They're nearer to where it's happening rather than all sat in the police station, have to run out of the police station when something happens. So we are using technology now to be able to address some of those issues.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think firstly what I want to say is that I think we're very blessed at the moment with the police coverage that we get. And I think I would like to commend that to you. My concern is, and we have to accept the 27% cuts, there is a fall and has been a fall in the number of police officers situated in Minehead and the surrounding areas over the last 10 years. So just over 10 years, we've had COD here. So, things have changed. What worries me, though, is this business of the central cells in Bridgewater being used if we don't have the right number of resources here. Because if we haven't got the people, and all of a sudden 2 people are going to have to take somebody to Bridgewater, by the time they've taken them to Bridgewater, far side of Bridgewater, handed them over, done the documentation and got back, there's a good 2.5 hours gone. What's happening then when there's an adult weekend at Butlins, when there's the Wellington Hotel at the top of the town, and as it is at the moment, only 4 policemen generally on duty? 2 go. I have heard a rumour they're going to come from Tiverton, or is it Taunton, or where is it from? But that's a delay in terms of response, and what worries me is we've got nowhere to place the prisoner if you're in custody, unless you take them away, and that means we are losing valuable people on the ground here. And don't forget, in the summer, our population grows about 10-fold. The police resources, and that's not a dig at you, does not go up that amount. What happens is that we are, it is more crime in the summer. You said yourself, Nick, it's seasonal. But we've got to have the rationale, we've got to have resources to cover that. We can't wait for somebody to come from Taunton if there's a big fight going off in the centre of Minehead.
I think there are 2 things that you do there, and I accept the point, and I see the risk, which is why we did all the operating model work behind the opening of the custody centres. But the first thing you do is plan. You plan to have resources there at the time you need them. So more people will be doing late shifts. So the chances of there being more people on duty to provide support is going up, because a higher proportion of a shrinking workforce will be referred to as frontline, and fewer people will be home in time for countdown. That's things I described earlier on. You also plan to move your resources around more effectively in a dynamic sense. In a football game, if you're, and incidentally, goalless after 20 minutes, I can inform you, the wonders of modern technology. In a football game, if one of your centre backs goes up to the front, goes up front to try and score at a corner, somebody else comes across and covers for them. Well, ditto here. If somebody makes an arrest and they're they're taking the person they've arrested up to Bridgewater, then the control room needs to be thinking, oh, who do we move across? How do we move the pieces around on the chessboard to ensure we've got some cover? That's just intelligent resource deployment. There isn't a box of police officers in the station we can break open and just pull another one out. But we'll do our best to plan to have the right people in the right numbers on duty at the right time, to anticipate events where it's reasonable to assume there'll be greater demand, to put in place arrangements like the custody collection arrangements that I just described to you, so that at times of peak demand, you can actually have a van ready to come and collect the person who's been arrested, rather than expect arresting officers to take them up there. All of those little habits, all of those sensible resource deployment techniques that, there's nothing particularly new or clever about this. Tesco have known for years to send me, when I do my online shop, to only send me 1 driver and 1 van with my shop, rather than 3 vans just because they 2 wanted to come and have a look. It's sensible resource deployment is what I'm talking about here, and making the best of a difficult situation. But the rationale for moving to smaller buildings is, as I've said before, it'll retain as far as we possibly can the number of operational officers for us to use and the pieces on this chessboard. And if we keep buildings that are too big or we can't afford, then the chances of pulling that off will be greatly diminished.
I'll just very quickly add to that. You suggested that potentially it was going to be 2.5 hours. The people that are arrested and taken to Bridgewater, there will be teams of investigators at Bridgewater, and their sole job is to investigate and interview people that are arrested and brought to the station. So officers that are taking prisoners there will be dropping them more or less at the door and turning straight back round. They'll hardly even need to go into the building.
Okay. Gentleman right at the back. I'm not sure. Gentleman.
Thank you. Could you please elaborate on the policing arrangements around the Hinkley Point development? There seem to be an awful lot of assumptions in all sorts of areas of civic life about what is happening there, but we do face an increase which is not 100-fold but 1,000-fold in terms of the size of that community, and the pressure on all our social services, and especially policing, is inevitably going to be immense.
We've been keeping a pretty close eye on that. Sue and I have been together to visit the site at Hinkley Point. We've also been involved in negotiations with EDF and with local authorities about the likely surge in policing demand associated with the development. We've already received funding for an operational planning team, and I'd anticipate that a decent proportion of our costs will be met as part of the development. I should say, however, that some of the consequential costs, a lot of workers, perhaps significant proportions of them being young men with a bit of cash in their pockets in our sort of towns and pubs weekend evenings, that's going to place demand on us, and I'm not sure we'll need to be vigilant to ensure that the extra resourcing we're getting is going to equip us to meet that challenge. The other thing is I've seen some interesting coverage today from Leicestershire, where the Chief Constable contacted me to say that his Police and Crime Commissioner, Clive Loader, has sought a judicial review of a plan for a housing development because he thinks that the requisite money, they call it Section 106 funding, to ensure that the impact of that housing development is compensated for in terms of impact on local services is too little and will be arriving too late. So we'll be watching the Leicestershire case very closely, and I'll do that both in my capacity as chief here, but also national lead for finance and resources. But also we'll be keeping the pressure on EDF. And it's one of the advantages of having a police and crime commissioner. I think my role is inherently non-political, and I'll simply point out the operational consequences of one or other decision. It's then for the police and crime commissioner to get involved with the ugly politics of it, and I'll leave that to her. By the way, can I say one other thing? I have very bad news for you, ladies and gentlemen. We've gone behind to Yeovil.
Toby?
Good evening. Given that in West Somerset we're far closer to Devon than we are to Bristol, and that it's easier for our local police to communicate with Brislington or Bath than it is with Bampton or Linton, would it not make economic and operational sense for us to be working on southwest policing?
Okay, I'll start with this. There is. And I'm going to give you the same answer because you've asked a similar question earlier on today. But the basic answer is that there has to be much more collaboration between the five forces. The five forces being Devon and Cornwall, Avon and Somerset, Dorset, Gloucestershire and Wiltshire. And as PCCs, and I would say this, wouldn't I think that there has been a really good kickstart in order to get far more going on about how we can do much more stuff together. And that is caused by because we've all got massive savings to find, but also we can be far more effective and far more efficient because we do have these borders between the police forces, but ones that the criminals don't recognise. And it's beholden on us to make sure that we can deliver cross-border. I was speaking earlier to an officer, and there is a good contact between, particularly in this area, between us and Devon and Cornwall. Could it be better? Yes, it could, and we have to find ways of making sure that communication is very much at the forefront. So operationally, that can go on. But you're absolutely right. There has to be more and more work done on creating all the forces, particularly the five forces, working as closely together as we can, because that is the way that we will save money, but also we'll be able to provide a much better service to local people without having very false borders, which we have at the moment.
I'd say three things. The first is that what police force structures we should have, whether they're regional, sub-regional, national or local police forces, is a matter for ministers to decide, not for chief constables. I'll get on and police in whatever kind of an environment they want me to police in. And they might want ultimately to answer the challenges that are coming down the line, the additional financial challenges. I think there'd be a very sensible model in which you could say that local police and crime commissioners are responsible for the neighbourhood, the CID and the response functions, and everything else gets aggregated up to a more efficient economic level. And as lead for finance and resources, I can tell ministers, I've told Damien Green, the police minister, that I think that could save him some money, but in the end they are political choices. The second thing I think it's important to say is that it is important that ministers understand that it is their job to say how policing should be organised in this country, because leaving it to individual chiefs is, or indeed individual police and crime commissioners, with no steer as to how ministers want things set up, you create a slightly chaotic situation where you have some areas going for sub-regional collaboration, some going for cross-regional collaboration, some prefer the regional model, some the virtual, some cross-functional, some cross-sector. It's like watching a kid play with 3 different coloured balls of wool. It's fine as they get ever more tangled up together, provided you never want to untangle it in the future. But I think it's ministers' responsibility to say how they want policing set up in this country, and when they fail to do so, it's like asking an orchestra to conduct itself. You know, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And it's not that there's one big, very difficult thing. It's just there's a number of small, irritating, if to use management speak, buggeration factors that just make it really, really hard to do. The third thing, and where I do accept responsibility as chief, is that it's our responsibility to make sure that the boundaries that exist between police forces have the minimum operational impact, and so that we can operate in an interoperable way, so that if a villain is going across force boundaries or is living in force A, committing crime in force B, and then getting back to look after, dispose of their ill-gotten gains in force C, we're up to that, and that shouldn't matter. And actually, we've made huge strides over the last couple of decades in dealing with that. The police radio system, the airwave system, criticised by many for being expensive, it's this massive £380 million per annum PFI digital network. Nevertheless, is very effective, and it means that an officer from Somerset can talk to an officer in any other force in the country through the single handset, and it's been excellent technology. Probably we've not made the best use of it, but we've got it. Similarly, in 2011, the police service, in response to Lord Bishard's recommendation after Soham, we rolled out the Police National Database, and for the first time we linked up the intelligence system of all 43 police forces in England and Wales and Scotland and the Serious Organised Crime Agency and other partners beyond. So actually, that operational responsibility to remove the seam and to remove the interruption to service that is inherent in a 43 force structure, we've done quite well. Finally, of course, we rely on the goodwill, common sense, and lack of parochialism of the people on the ground to have the wit to pick up the phone, to get to the nearest police station that's in the next force area, perhaps make an arrangement where they're swapping some kit, allowing each other access to their technology, arranging joint tasking across the border, etc., etc. And that's not something Chief Constable should need to tell you to do. That's kind of your job if you police an area like this.
Okay. Toby?
Good evening. I'm the second Leicester City supporter here tonight.
They need us up there, don't they?
I've got a couple of questions actually. The first one is, you say that you've got a plan that is coming out for the West Somerset area. When are we going to be asked to contribute to it? I ask it as a parish councillor because I've never been asked.
It has been out for draft consultation since just after Christmas, and I think if you'd like to look at it, we'll by all means we'll send it to you, or we'll email it to you. In fact, we've got some drafts at the back of the room, but we have engaged with all the community safety partnerships, with the local authorities, so that everyone can have sight of those while they have been in draft. And we have taken on board a lot of comments from people wanting to improve it.
Well, we've made lots of comments, but I haven't seen your plan.
Okay, well, by all means have a look there, and you can talk to some of the team tonight.
The second thing is community speed watch. We've been running hours for the last year. One of the major things that we've noticed is that we're feeding a lot of information into the system, but there's nothing coming back confirming whether it's worthwhile information, what is the success rate, how many people are actually being prosecuted or even warned. So all the work is being done on the ground, but there's nothing actually being fed back to say how well or what we need to do to improve it.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Nick and probably Nikki to respond to that. But first of all, let me say that I'm extremely supportive of Community Speedwatch. I'm disappointed by what you're saying. There is a lot of work that's going on to make sure that we really give a good kickstart to Community Speedwatch and making sure that you get that information. Communication is a complete circle. As long as if you're giving information in and you're not going to get anything back, in the end we all give up because we think it's just going into a black hole. And I do not want that to happen. And I know that the constabulary are looking very hard on how to make sure that information is fed back to you. That reinforces that you are making an extremely valuable contribution to road safety. And you know, I'm sure Nick will reinforce the fact that we are doing better, but we're obviously not doing well enough for you to make those comments.
Yeah, I mean, on Community Speedwatch itself, we'd acknowledge that the scheme stalled locally in 2013, but now there's been a concerted effort more recently to retrain and reinvigorate it. Recently, Inspector Adam Cooper is the person responsible for that, and my headquarters colleague, Chief Inspector Jan Georgiou. Although, I mean, local ownership here, we've got Paul at the back. He's ready to. His hands in the air. Before Paul tells you what's going to happen next and what's happening now, could I just say, number one, that I accept the principle and Sue's principal position that Community Speedwatch has to be a good idea in a world where I've shrunk, or my predecessor and I have between us shrunk the traffic department. It's now called the Roads Policing Unit, but it's the same thing. We've shrunk it to about 2/3 of its original size. We have to get whatever help we can. That's what prompted me to say, let's get those speed cameras switched back on. Happy to talk about that. But actually, there's an integrated rationale to this that starts with Speedwatch, reaches out into education. Tomorrow, please don't, if the press in the room don't publish this till tomorrow, I'll be in trouble, but we'll be announcing that we'll be giving free courses to any young drivers in Avon and Somerset policing area to encourage safer driving, because such a high proportion of people who die on the roads, so drivers between 17 and 24, will be, and they get nothing after they've passed the driving test. So we'll be bringing them in and giving them, paid for by the proceeds of the cameras, free driver awareness sessions for anybody who wants one. There'll be the fixed camera enforcement. I've been down to the cash point. I've got my few quid ready to buy the cameras back off Somerset County Council and look forward to finalising that deal. We also have an increasing number of mobile detector vans. Bit by bit, that combination of community activity, police enforcement, education, and of course other factors which are the responsibility of partners, better road design, etc., etc. They will come together and I hope restarts the downward momentum which we were enjoying for several years, which stalled about 2010-11 and has been plateauing since. We want to restart that downward momentum of the numbers of people killed and seriously injured on our roads. But Paul Mogg, the Chief Inspector, who is my person to blame for this locally, is now going to tell us what's happening.
Thanks very much, boss. If I could just come down the front, just so everyone doesn't crane their neck. I knew I was going to get a walk-on part in this particular forum. Can everyone hear me at the back? Yep, good stuff. Just to underline in terms of what the boss has said, what Sue said, what Nick has said in relation to Community Speedwatch, we recognise how important this is. As a police officer, I don't think there's anything more devastating than the loss that a family can suffer in relation to someone who has a loved one who's been killed as a result of a speeding vehicle. In terms of Community Speedwatch, we've identified that we did have a problem in relation to the process flow, in relation to the information that volunteers were giving to us out and about within the communities. And basically what was happening was we were getting members of the public, some as far flung as Edinburgh, Scotland, Outer Hebrides, who were writing to us to say, we've had a letter from the police to say that we've been speeding within the Somerset area. We have never, ever visited Somerset. What's going wrong? There's a bit of a problem in your system. And what we were identifying is that volunteers were taking note of registration numbers. They were putting on the forms. There is a process flow because it's Devon and Somerset Fire who help us out with the keying in relation to those particular forms that then go off, produce letters and go out to motorists and members of the public. And basically, we were finding that we were getting a large degree of errors and there was a problem in relation to our process. So what we did was we suspended Community Speedwatch, we communicated that with the organisers, and then what we ensured was that we've gone back, we've made sure that we've got the right data cleansing that takes place within the police station, and we only 2 days ago relaunched Community Speedwatch within the Somerset West area. And what we've done is we've got members of our cadet force, Community Speedwatch volunteers, and indeed members of our road policing unit involved in those particular schemes. And what we anticipate will happen now is there will be a high degree of accuracy and prosecution in relation to those people that are actually offending in our local areas. So we're back, and we're back better and more efficient than we've been in the past. And certainly in terms of my neighbourhood inspectors, one of the thrusts that we'll have locally is around dominating and pushing forward the Community Speedwatch schemes. For this particular area, you've got 4. My intention is to push that forward even more because obviously we want to give you the quality of service and ensure that you don't have speeding traffic in your communities, which is really, really important to you. So hopefully that answers one of the local questions that you may have. But happy to answer any more questions in relation to Community Speedwatch, certainly at the end.
Thank you.
And I would just, your actual point was that it's not a one-way flow of information and you need feedback because you want to know that you're being successful. So we absolutely guarantee that we will get that to you.
Not only that, it would make us more efficient.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
The gentleman just there, that you just raised your hand. Thank you.
Yes, I'm a member of the advisory, independent advisory group which you created and which hasn't been mentioned here tonight, and the importance, the role it plays within a relationship between the police and the community, which we're trying to create a group here for this area could relate to the whole issue of the community being highlighted tonight. We feel that is very important as a group from form a relationship between the community and the police and to bring forward all the issues concern the community. One of the things we experience is when we visit the flood area in Bridgewater and we find that the police was guarding those properties 24 hours straight through in the rain, in the wind, and everything. And I commend that. But what I'm trying to highlight is taking this opportunity tonight and through the chair is that we are looking for a member to form in this area to be working closely with Sean in the police station as well as with Paul. And I don't know if Paul or Sean want to speak something about that because they play a very big role.
Thank you. I'm sure one of them will. I've actually been updated on how the Independent Advisory Group have got a meeting next month, I think, although I'm sure Shane will tell me in a minute. And I'm trying to get a specific Independent Advisory Group for this area because they are the critical friends. They are the people who are got, very grounded in their communities and feeding directly into local policing is absolutely key. So any work that we can do to help that get off the ground, we can. But does any of the, I can't see, does any of the officers here want to just talk about what you're trying to do as far as the meeting that's taking place in Taunton?
Can I just say, as chairman of the IAG, that we've come over tonight and been so warmly welcomed with old friends and colleagues. And if anybody wants to come and talk to us afterwards, we're more than interested in recruiting.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure I hope that there will be many people interested in that. Did any of the officers just want to talk about the IAGs?
You might want to go and sit at the front, Paul.
Hello again. I'm very, very grateful for colleagues in relation to the Independent Advisory Group who have come along tonight. Certainly, we'd like to use it as a bit of an opportunity as well in terms of marketing the Independent Advisory Group, because as already been said by the panel, what's really important is that we throw open the doors in relation to policing and we ensure that we get a really kind of ethical look at everything we do. And sometimes as police officers and members of police staff, sometimes we just fall into processes because that's the way we've always done things. Sometimes it's just healthy to have a different perspective, to have a community aspect, for someone to advise us or to think about, have you thought about doing something differently in a different way? The Independent Advisory Group is obviously reflective of the communities that we police, and we're slowly picking up interested members who'd like to be part of that. Certainly, I would ask if there's anyone present who would very much like to be part of the Independent Advisory Group, please speak to myself, Keith or Nick in relation to some of the embryonic stuff that we're starting to do already. They were very active in the floods, of which I'm very thankful, gentlemen, in relation to going down to the flood zones, inspecting what the multi-agency response was, being able to comment, being able to act as a two-way conduit in relation to everything that was happening in those particular areas. And certainly, I'm very keen to get them involved in so many other issues. For instance, legal highs seems to be on the increase now, certainly in the Taunton area. I'd like to get them very much involved in that, because obviously that has spin-offs in relation to begging, antisocial behaviour, all sorts of issues that can affect communities' lives and how people feel about their communities. I'd also like to get them very much involved in relation to stop and search, and to see whether we as the police have got that right, the numbers of various members of the communities that are stopped, and whether those are justified. And so what the Independent Advisory Group are going through at the moment is a familiarisation in relation to some of the police procedures. We're getting them involved and going along in an acquaint visit in relation to our communications centre at Portishead, so as they can see the sheer number of calls that come into us on a 24-hour period. And they're also going to go out on ride-alongs so as they can understand some of the dynamics in terms of how frontline police officers deal with situations, and can then be able to inform the debate in terms of how we structure our business going forward. So certainly would very, very much appreciate anyone here who feels that they'd like to get involved in that Independent Advisory Group.
Thank you.
Just a 2-minute quick history lesson. If you're sitting there thinking, what's all this Independent Advisory Group thing? They came about as a result of the Stephen Lawrence investigation and the Macpherson inquiry that followed that. And basically, the thinking went, sometimes the police don't know when they're not meeting people's needs. And so if you've got police officers who are all white, they're policing an area that's half Muslim, and you decide we're going to make some friends with the community by having a cheese and wine party, actually, that's quite a bad idea. Or, you know, we're going to have a meeting on a Friday lunchtime. Well, actually, you know, people at the mosque want to be at the mosque on a Friday lunchtime at Friday prayers. They don't want to be in the police station. Ditto. Paul mentioned stop and search. You know, the police needed to be reminded of what's the impact like on, you know, young, as at the time it was young black kids in certain areas in London of just being stopped and searched all the time. Well, translate that into Bristol. Yes, you know, we get independent advice in and around Bristol that is very similar. Here it's a bit different. But actually, I remember coming, I didn't know, one end of a farm vehicle from another when I came as chief constable, and said, well, why don't we get together with a few farmers? And somebody said, well, don't do it next month. Why not? Well, it's harvest. You know, they're busy from 5:30 in the morning till the last light of day. And so that's the type of advice. You know, you know, yes, bits of it are advice on professional practice, but it's members of the community saying, look, you're the police, and you know what you're doing, but we understand our community really well, and we can help you understand the impact of your decisions and your plans and your bright ideas on this community, because we live here and our families have been here for a long time. So that's the background. And of course there are even within predominantly white rural communities like this, there are then people from different backgrounds who can say, understand the specific impact of your policies on people from our community. So that's what we have in mind. That's why we think it's a good idea to have an independent advisory group. And if you think that you have an insight that will help us better understand the impact of our policies, then we'd be delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. Gentleman in the pink jumper. No.
I'm Ron Bridle, Town Councillor, Minehead Town Council. What do you see is the role of street pastors, and what do you consider the advantage of having them is?
Well, let me just kick off on that. Street pastors play an absolutely vital role. I've been out with them in various areas on a Saturday night, handing out the flip-flops, the lollipops, and the bottles of water. And I think, one, that they are a group of people that people trust and feel safe. I've seen them also in talking to, particularly with young men who are able, and they're able to diffuse some very, they can get very aggravated, especially with having consumed too much alcohol. And I've seen street pastors diffuse that into the end where everyone just gives everyone a hug and moves on. I was cynical of street pastors because I'd been told what they did, and I thought, barring the fact that they almost have halos, how could they affect young people on a Friday, Saturday night, or in Taunton other nights as well? I have been totally persuaded. I have seen them in action, and I think they play a critical role because they are safe. They diffuse. They can diffuse so many things, and that they are also a good pair of ears for people to talk to who haven't been able to talk to other people. So don't want to talk to the police, don't want to talk to statutory organisations, but a very safe and trusted pair of ears that can help a lot of individuals, particularly young people, on a Friday and Saturday. So I'm very supportive. We have funded quite a lot of work with that. But that's not an operational answer. I'm just saying that as a Police and Crime Commissioner, having been out with them, I've seen that they've done some excellent work.
And you've forgotten the flip-flops.
And I forgot the flip-flops. In fact, I borrowed a pair of flip-flops because I was in stupid shoes, so I had to use them on the way home.
Yeah, no, absolutely 100% support. Wow, what a fantastic bunch of volunteers. We can't be everywhere, and sometimes when we get tied up with things during the evenings, they could be for a short time the only person that's out on the street that's helping to keep people safe until we get back again. The officers and the staff have built up a fantastic relationship with the volunteers that come out and act as street pastors. And actually, I'm aware of a lot of the street pastors who've made up relationships with people that they see regularly who are out and about enjoying themselves on Friday and Saturday nights. So it works really well together. As Sue said, the young people have confidence and trust the volunteers, and it's a visible presence on the street that can actually help people. And absolutely, I am convinced, I can't say how much crime would have been caused if they weren't there, but I'm absolutely convinced it helps keep our community safe and reduce crime.
I agree with everything that's been said. I just added an additional point. I think one of the things that got us into such a pickle in our town and city centres a few years ago was that effectively people over the age of 30 decided that it wasn't a safe or desirable place to be and vacated the streets. And if you look at the difference between continental city centres and town centres to which we aspire and ours, I think it's fundamentally that point. And I think the street pastors and others represent that incremental reclaiming of town and city centres for all. And I think that has a very positive impact on the behaviour of young people. So yes, there are the paralytic ones who are being helped out, the ones who are getting a bit teary being given a lollipop, and the girls who can't walk anymore being given flip-flops to replace the killer heels. But I think there's just this broader good of, the whole community reclaiming weekend evenings in our town centres, and it's absolutely to be encouraged. So agreeing with everything that's been said before, I think there's more to it than even that.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
As a member of Minehead Street Pastors, I'm pushing and my halo is shining. I really wanted to comment on the police presence on a Saturday night and early hours of Sunday morning in Wellington Square, which is when the Minehead Street pastors are out. And the thing that impresses us immensely is the way in which the officers relate to the people who are enjoying themselves, or not, as the case may be. They try incredibly hard not to arrest them. They talk to them. They persuade them. They're cheerful. And at the end of the day, I think they do a wonderful job out there in the early hours of a Sunday morning. And I'm glad that, I hope that the powers that be will recognise that that is a peak time for Minehead. And in terms of thinking about provision for arrested people, that is a time when maybe that van would be useful rather than take those police officers off the street. And the second thing is that I hope that the arrangement that the police have with Butlins will continue, where extra officers seem to be on the beat on a Saturday lunchtime. I don't know if anybody's noticed them, but they are there on a Saturday lunchtime when it's certain weekends down at Butlins. I think that's very commendable, and I think it's a good use of police resources.
I'm really appreciative of the kind comments. Of course, events like this, you see, we've got colleagues standing at the back and sitting in the audience. There's a tendency for people to seize the opportunity on days like today to tell us what might be better, or to tell us what your anxieties are about the future. And it's very nice just to hear people celebrate, certainly, and sustain me in my belief that we've got brilliant policing. Actually, I think we've got the best policing in the world in the United Kingdom, and actually, people, this force is full of people who come to work every day to do their best to keep people safe, to talk to, to look after people, and I appreciate you saying that. The second thing I'd say is I think from a social policy perspective, and I don't want to sound like a sociologist, but actually, it's quite a good thing if we don't criminalise too many young people, and if people are just being a bit daft and we can have a word with them and send them home, rather than resorting to immediate arrest, which is very much the way in some city centres and the way they're policed. That use of discretion and common sense, banking the advantage that we have with the community here, again, seems to me a very sensible thing. I would say, as if we're talking about the powers that be, I guess that among others that probably means me. And yes, I hear your point, and we do understand that. Of course, it's not just Minehead which is at its busiest on a Friday and Saturday evening. That is when people tend to want to go out. But we're doing our best to ensure that the place our resources are placed reflects that demand. But thank you very much indeed for your kind comments.
Yeah, and just, I suppose, specifically the points you made about our officers working with Butlins, absolutely. The strength of that relationship is really important. We don't intend on changing anything. We need to work really closely together so that they act responsibly and do everything they can to keep this a safe area, and we will respond and work with them to do that also. So we're not planning on taking anything away from that.
Okay. A few more questions, this gentleman in the front. Ran out of battery, have we?
I don't need a battery, I'm sure I speak quite well.
Yeah, they know. You're talking about local communities that have been involved with the local authorities. Minehead Town Council, we've recently, over the last few months, had 2 presentations made to us for 2 schemes which actually assist the police in their performance of their duties. One being the provision of additional CCTV cameras, and the other being the radios for a shop watch scheme. Now, whilst Minehead Town Council might be quite keen to support both of these, we have to account to the community for the way we spend our funds. And obviously with the CCTV television cameras, we've now been told there's additional works, the radio control room, so more funding is needed. Now, our problem is, as a local authority, we have to ask the question, what match funding comes? And we are told that no match funding is going to be available from the police force on both of these schemes. Now, I've picked up on the issue that you have additional funding now running.
perhaps you could tell us, can the local town council apply for 2 bites of the cherry and apply for 2 grants from your match funding schemes to assist in putting up some money towards these schemes? And perhaps on a political point of view, we're also told that the shops and the shop scheme, it would be unfair to ask them to contribute. Now, as a town council, I would say if they're benefiting by having these radios given to them, it is only right that they should perhaps do some match funding of their own as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, on a political basis, do you feel that it is right that shopkeepers who would benefit from this scheme should be asked to make some contribution prior to radios being given to them?
As far as the radios, we've done some grant funding for some of the radios in some of the communities, and some of that has to be match funded, so they will contribute something, and the community safety grant will contribute, or the action fund will contribute as well to that. But they are really viable, and they make a lot of sense, but everyone has to contribute to that. Regarding the second bite of the cherry, if I was Minehead Town Council, I'd bite at every cherry that was going past, to be honest. And I think the way forward for that is to apply through the community safety grant, through the community safety partnerships, because certainly there has been funding, and I think we've done some funding at Watch It for CCTV as well. So it's through the community safety partnerships that you need to be able to put your bid in.
Could I just say, on the point about the police contributing, it frustrates me that we get to the end of another financial year where, and it's a consequence of austerity, you know, people they've tuned into the fact that times are hard, and we are underspending. You know, people do underspend. They're inherently cautious. They're watching every penny. And sometimes I've got to say, actually, let's spend up to our budget. You know, we've been given this much money. Let's spend up to that to make people safe. And there are still victims of crime out there. Let's have fewer victims by spending our cash. I, as the chief said back in September, look, we're beginning to see a bit of an underspend. Let's look for worthy, sensible, necessary projects that we can fund from this year's underspend, where we can get the money out the door by the end of March. We'd looked again in January and asked the same question, and it's frustrating to think that there might have been worthy schemes that weren't identified that would have been appropriate and suitable. We'll try again next year, because I guess we will see underspending again. It's the way people behave in a time of austerity. But actually, you know, I'm very conscious in the constabulary forever saying to people, let's concentrate as much on the £275 million we will spend this year as on the however many million we've got to save, and we shall do the same again next year. So I'll push, and perhaps it's, you know, perhaps the fault lies with me and with chief officers for not getting that message out sufficiently. But I think it's part of the modern reality of running a public service that at fixed intervals in the financial year you stop and say, what might we do if we're making savings elsewhere to spend up to budget in order to provide a better service and keep people safe. So I'll take that back, because it's slightly depressing to see a reasonably sizable underspend not offset by necessary spending that we could have done.
Okay, Toby, yeah. I think we're going to take 2 more questions, and then we'll need to wrap it up.
Hello. As a member of the local CCTV and Avon and Somerset Police volunteer, I'd just like to remind our councillors that we do not get paid. It's lovely that we have our CCTV, but we do it for free.
Thank you.
We appreciate it very much.
Okay. Okay, and then the gentleman in the pink jumper, and then that'll be it.
As chairman of Watch It Town Council, I'd like to say thank you very much for letting us have the funding for us to soon be able to have our CCTV. It's something we've long aspired to, and hopefully it's going to help us an awful lot. One of my questions would be, though, that recently we had a lot of problems in Watch It when the works were being done on the A39 with traffic coming through, which wasn't meant to come through. There were police officers there on the roads, and PCSOs were there. Unfortunately, people were still not taking any notice of them. We had a couple of incidents where there were fights broke out at the top of Cleve Hill because 2 police people couldn't get past each other. Could I just ask, if you're going to collaborate with local people, come and ask us that live there to say, please, which way the traffic can come. Perhaps we could just have a one-way system to try and see 2 buses go up one of the narrowest streets that there are. It is absolutely ridiculous.
You make an absolutely very valid point. The people that live and work in an area are the people that know how that area works and the roads work the best. So it's not just us that have responsibility and authority over that. We work really closely with local authority and the highways. But you make a valid point, and I'll make sure I feed that into all of our discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. Gentleman in the maroon jumper.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I'm able to get in on one of my pet hobby horses, and that's police officers and PCSOs, and I'm familiar with both Bath, Keynsham, as well as Minehead. Now, I accept there are many, many times when they should be patrolling in pairs, but 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning in Keynsham or in Bath is not the time. Now, I would accept that sometimes officers being tutored, but it's very nice to go around the streets of Bath or Keynsham chatting away, and I'm sure that they're talking about crime trends, local criminals, and how rather than what's on display at the local supermarkets and how cheap things are. Surely it's a case of basic supervision to stop officers and PCSOs patrolling in 2s when it's not necessary. Spread your resources. The public will approach a single officer more readily than they will a pair. A pair of officers won't do very much. One on his own might. There's always hope. I think 2 in a car, actually, despite what it might seem, 2 officers in a car will probably produce more work than one on his own in a car. But please, get your sergeants and inspectors out there looking at these guys that are leaving the station, going out in pairs, day in and day out. It's a waste of your resources.
I think I did mention something about this in my earlier remarks, and I do agree with you to the extent that we're actually penalising our northeastern area and Bristol area by taking more officers off them than we are from Somerset, because Somerset has been more effective at insisting on single patrolling rather than patrolling in pairs. So I absolutely agree with you. Our local commanders will get that message. You know, necessity is, of course, the mother of invention, and the financial necessity that's been a consistent backdrop to our conversation this evening means we just can't afford it, let alone, you know, everything else that you describe, and I agree with every word you've said. So we'll be pushing hard, and you know, people are realising, you know, people, up and coming people who are after my job and Nikki's job in a few years' time, we're giving them some very clear messages about the way, you know, if you want to get promoted in this force, this is what you've got to do, this is the way you've got to behave, and making best use of resources and understanding the need for an efficient police force, as well as the things about, you know, fair treatment of people and integrity. They're all core to that message, as is collaborative working. You know, and people who want to get on are beginning to hear that and are responding, and I hope that we will see progress. But please do feel free to have a word yourself, or send me an email or a tweet.
Strength in numbers or something like that.
Well, there you are. Well, that's not what they're being told by me.
Anyway, thank you, Nick, and I'd like to say thank you to the Chief Constable and to Nikki, but most of all, a very big thank you to all of you, because, you know, we can be a much better police service, a much better police and crime commissioner, because we have listened to you, and I hope you found it useful for tonight. But thank you for all coming out this evening. Thank you. And thank you, Tim.